Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
Hello, and welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple so that you can fully live and fully live now, not 30 years from today. Really excited to have actually a newer friend, I'm going to say, to me on the podcast. And there's lots in common. So I think you'll see why I'm excited to have Jon Vroman on the podcast from Front Row Dads. And so, yeah, with that, I'll give a little bit of backstory with Jon, and then maybe have you fill in some gaps and details that you want to cover, Jon. But welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast, first and foremost.
Scott, man, I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. Introed by our good friend, Rich Christiansen. And, anytime Rich introduced me to anyone, or candidly, anytime Rich asked me to do something, it's just a yes. That's the relationship I have with him. So I knew you and I would have lots in common and hit it off. And certainly we have. And I'll actually start with, I have been following and using GTD, getting things done for years. And
Sure.
then the protocol that I use for that is Microsoft To-Dos. And in there, you always start with your weekly review, and you put really your purpose and like what this is at a high level. And then you come down. And mine is to serve. Every moment presents itself for you to lift it. So that's how I do my best to show up. And then as you scale down there, it talks about roles. And my roles that I put in is I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a team member, and I'm an entrepreneur, in that order. And so with that, that tells, I think, a lot about where we, connect, and how Rich said, you got to meet Jon Vroman. So I'll just share a little bit of this with the audience, okay, as they may not know you, but Jon founded Front Row Dads as he wanted to win at home and not just at work. And then over the last 5 years, it's become a diverse group, 230 dads, 12 different countries, who share a common bond of choosing to put family first as they grow their businesses. So there's so much for us to talk about, so much I want to share in that realm. But let me first just say again, thanks for joining, Jon. And if you would just share some of how'd that come to be? Like, what happened that you founded Front Row Dads and like this became who you are and your purpose?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories to talk about, because it was the time in life when I really started to feel like I was waking up to what I was born to do. And I think in my 20s, like many people, I'm trying to figure out what that is professionally. How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to make an impact in the world? And I was really after that big. I was heavy into the personal development space, and I was pushing myself, and I was investing at a very young age into personal growth. And I developed some great habits with that. And then I fell in love and wanted a family. But those strong habits of like putting me first, putting my business first, they carried into my family life. And 6 years into being married with one child and one on the way, I realized that the things that had gotten me to a place of like a great business, and having things that I thought I needed to have, some success, some monetary, some wealth, and a home and a car, and I could travel. All of a sudden, I realized that I was missing the parts that I didn't hone and master in my 20s, which was being present for children. Just wasn't my focus. So I needed to relearn and unlearn and just evolve as a man. And so I did what I always wanted to do whenever I learned any skill prior, was surround myself with great people. And at that point in my life, and I'm talking this wake up, by the way, is happening in my, let's say my late 30s to my early 40s. This is the wake up, right? That I looked around and I'm like, I am so fortunate to be surrounded by such extraordinary people that have done some incredible things with their lives, especially professionally, because that was our big focus. And I knew that I wasn't the only one struggling here. I knew there were other men who were trying to find that balance between the love they had for their work and wanting to make a difference in the world and show their kids the way, pave the way and say, this is how to work hard. This is how to go after your dreams, but then also be there with their families and really, truly put their family first. I sent out the bat signal to the guys, and 30 people showed up in Philadelphia and said, I don't talk about fatherhood or marriage or family enough. I'm exhausted from talking about work. I love it, but I've exhausted that pretty well, and I need to change the conversation. And that was 6 years ago. And that's why things are going the way they are now, because there's a group of people out there who wanted this and didn't have it in their life.
That's so amazing. It couldn't resonate with me more. And I've got it wrong many times. I really feel like I have it right now, and it's still work in progress. Totally. It's just, gosh, well, I'll share this. So like, you've heard me talk about the infinite entrepreneur. That's my life's work. It's my next 25-year calling, and it's 4 things. And this is the Way to Wealth podcast. So it's one of the 4 things, which is the money piece. And it's actually the last piece. And I start at life, health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. And like, that's the eye level. Let's heal and let's get that whole first. Then from there, we drop to Legato Family, which this is Rich's life's work. I bring some structure to it, but flat out, this is he got this dead nuts right, how to raise a family. That's the we level, like getting clear on who we are and healing ourselves, and then taking that to the family and getting family harmony and healing that. Then we go to the company and the business. And for me, it's 4 Ps: purpose, people, process, and profits. Create something sustainable. But that's what we take to the world. And then we can use money. My process is Way to Wealth, whatever you use, great, to support and vote with our dollars our individual values, our family values, and our company values. So that's why I'm just so aligned with this message. Kudos for you for recognizing it and bringing your work to the world. So to me, it's I call it the I, we, all model. I may have originally heard that from Paul Chek, but it's like, that's where it's at. And it goes back to indigenous wisdom. These elders have been telling us this for years. And it's like, there is this an awakening where it's time to get back to that. So man, I love what you're up to there. And I just wanted to share more of that frame, but I want to hear more about, what you do, how you do it, and some of the depth of the work and some of the amazing dads that are a part of this.
Yeah, it's community. It's not as much content, although content always comes through community. You co-create the content together. I just made a post, yesterday about this woman, Phoebe Morochek, who's extraordinary, like just this magical woman who's been a part of my life. One of my best friends. She was coming through Austin. She stayed with us. And then watching her engage with my kids was incredible. And so I knew that what I wanted to do, like you, part of my framework was, how do I get my kids around other great people? That was like part of the process. How do I bring these people into my home? How do I take my kids to their home? Literally and figuratively speaking. And somebody who we have a mutual connection to, Samuel, was passing through recently. And he came in and sat at my kitchen table. And I said, Samuel, what would you tell Tiger? He's 13. You were 13. What do you wish somebody had told you? What do you know now that, again, you wish you would have had at 13? And he just poured into Tiger for like 10 or 15 minutes, this beautiful wisdom. And Tiger was just hanging on his every word. And it was just awesome, man. So that's what we are attempting to do, is to do this together, because a lot of guys can create independent success. A lot of guys do. They have independent success in physical activities, marathons that they train for individually and run. Now, again, we could have the argument that nothing is individual because they got those shoes from somebody who made them and everything's a team sport, for sure. But they're a little more independence in some of these things. And, but yet at the same time, when these men come together, their egos seem to just be put aside, and they have all this wisdom, but yet there's so much humility amongst these great men. And I think that's what I saw in you, Scott, and in Rich, is this like incredible desire to serve, but not from a place of bragging, like I need to stand on the podium so that you can applaud me, but like, hey, we confident that we have some things to share with the world. And yet we're coming at this from this isn't going to be perfect for everybody, but I know it's right for somebody. And I'm just there to find alignment and find harmony. And that's what we're after. That building an ecosystem that, is in balance, if you will.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah. And so Samuel would be a good one to drop some wisdom to the kids. So that's so cool to hear. And yeah, how special was that? When I was out last week in Utah, Rich wanted to introduce me to lots of people, including the university. And it was amazing. And he really wanted to introduce me to his wife. So I stayed there and got to meet her, an amazing human being. And he wanted me to meet his kids. And I was like, Rich, of everyone I could meet out here, like, that's who let's do that. Yeah. So we did, right? Had dinner with one and then played pickleball with two of them, which I didn't even know what pickleball was. I did win, but we will set that aside for now. Anyway, I didn't even know what it was, but it was so awesome to meet his family and his kids, because it's one thing to talk about it and hear it and see the frame and structure. And I know he's genuine and it's real. It's another thing to actually see the results of it, which are pure magic and where the real juice is. And then I said, when you come, mine are grown. However, when he's in town again, they need to meet him, or for the exact same reason. Have the connection, ask questions, sit at the table over breaking bread, and be like, listen from this man of wisdom, what he's learned. What would you do when you were 25 or 30 or late 20s or whatever? What a great opportunity that we have with this community of wisdom. And it's basically sounds like what you structured.
Yeah. Listen, we couldn't have teed this up any better, Scott, if we had tried, but I'm not joking. I'm looking at my calendar right now and I'm going to talk with Matthew, Rich's son, 30 minutes after we're done today. So it is just beautiful to see this tapestry being woven. It's really nice.
Ask him about pickleball. So yes, that's hilarious. Yeah, what a great young man, and what a great family he has created. And it gets it, man. The fruits are there, right? And so that's like one of the things to look for. It's like when I'm listening to someone, the two things that I look for, and Rich and I have actually had this conversation. One is, what's the frequency behind the message, right? Words are one thing. And then what's the frequency behind it that I try to tune into? Someone asked me this because they were saying, all right, one of your things is to make the money clean. What's that mean? And I say, well, we vote with our dollars. So let's just make sure we're in alignment with it. That when we're voting with our dollars, we're investing in stocks, you're investing in a company, you're buying clothes, whatever. Let's make sure, do our best. We're not perfect, nor am I. Still hit the easy button, a lot of times without doing my due diligence. Yet just working towards that. That's one thing I need. And then it goes deeper than that. And so a guy asked me, I won't mention his name because it's a name you'd recognize. He just says, so when we're looking at politicians, how do we know? Like, how do I know that this person's going to make the money clean? Right. The only thing that I can tell you is three things. One is, what's the frequency behind the words? Forget the words for a second. What's the frequency? Is it resonating with truth to you? Then two, what's their fruits? Right. And that's why going to see Rich and his kids, the fruits are there, man. So the frequency's there and then the fruit's there. So it's like totally all in, 100% resonating, 100% trust you. And then three, who's in your trusted network that may have contacts with that person, let's say elected official, that you can ask that knows them, right? So they're my three things of how can we make sure we're dealing in integrity and that these people are going to hold true to what they're saying. So yeah, you can't make some of this up.
Yeah, no, that's really an important skill to teach somebody. I was just listening to John Tyson. He wrote a book called The Intentional Father. He's a pastor out of New York, and he had a program called Primal Path, which was a rite of passage program, really like John's stuff. And he's one of those guys that'll tell you like, hey, I don't know if I nailed it in this category of life or this category, but I will tell you I nailed it as a dad. Like, I even know that. I know how I showed up. I know how intentional I was. I will tell him, I hate to brag, but I will tell you I got this right. And it's just beautiful. And he, there was a reason I wanted to mention this. It's literally something you just said and it's evading me now. I
mentioned frequency, making the money clean.
Yes. That's right. It's, man, he had a story and it's slipping from me, but it has to do with modeling. And it has to do with if your son walks out of this is where it was. It was like, he did this exercise where it's like, imagine your kids walking out the door and ask yourself, like, what skills do they have? What experiences do they have? Right? What skill? There were 4 things. It was like, what experiences, what skills, what values, and something else. But it was 4 questions that you would ask yourself when they're walking out the door. I think, by the way, if your kids have already walked out the door, you could still do this by saying, when I leave this earth, what do I want my kids, right, to have as men? If they're already adults, what do I want them to, right? How do I want to contribute to their lives through their 20s, their 30s, their 40s? What questions will I ask them? What experiences will I have? Right? There's a whole other, it's not just 0 to 18, man. There's a whole life after that. My dad and I are still building our relationship. He's 76. We're still doing experiences together. We're still getting to know each other. Scott, you're going to love this, by the way. I realize I'm a little all over the place, but I'm just following my heart on this for a moment. I was in Wisconsin with my dad. This is a true story. 4 weeks ago-ish, right? And I'm with my 2 boys and my dad. And we're doing a fishing trip. And this is a bit of a rite of passage. We're inducting my son into a club that my dad started when he was a kid called the FHA, which is you get inducted into it. Oh, you should see the pictures, man. It's awesome. We're in this little cabin and my dad's sitting there over candlelight and he's telling the kids what the FHA stands for. It's really an awesome moment. But I'll tell you that my dad grew up in a generation where he didn't really hug. First of all, his dad didn't hug him. His dad didn't tell him that he loved him. He grew up in it with a very tough, dad who he loved, but was very, very tough. It was like, you might get a backhand if you spilled milk at the table type of thing. My dad was very strict, but not nearly as strict as that. He told me he loved me. He does give me a hug, but when he hugs me, he kind of keeps his elbow in a little bit, like it's a little bit of a distant. And I was at Chalet and I go, Dad, you asked me this year if there was anything that was unsaid that needed to be said, because you never know when it all could come to an end. Is there anything we want to just get out of the way right now and just say that because it needs to be said? And at the moment I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Because you and I have a pretty good relationship. I think I've told you all the things that I want to tell you. I love you. I've expressed myself. Nothing hits me right away. And then a couple of weeks later, it hit me. I was like, I don't like the way my dad hugs me. So I was standing there in the kitchen and I said, Dad, there is something. There's something that's in the way. I got to cover it with you. I want to teach you how to hug me. So I'm like, let me tell you how it currently goes. Let me tell you how I want it to go. I want our chests to meet in the middle. I want your arms to go completely around me. I want you to hug me like I matter. And it was so cool, man, that, at 47 years old, and it took a little bit of courage for me to say that, because I'm like, well, this sounds a little nuts that I'm going to tell my 76-year-old dad how to hug me. And I didn't want to make him feel bad. I didn't want him to make him feel like he's been doing it wrong for the last 20 years. But I was like, if this is what our relationship could be built on now, that level of transparency, that level of openness, that level of connectedness, then that's what I want. And if I just try to tie this all together and like put a bow on what I just said, a lot of it is envisioning the end and then working your way backwards and saying, what is it that I want this person in my life to experience, to feel, to know, to, right? Like to embody from our relationship. And a lot of that is what we do by acting it out. That is the fruits, right? That is the evidence. It's like, what's that old saying? What you're doing speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. And It's like, that's kids, right? Modeling our behaviors. And that never ends. It never ends. And I think that that's why we surround ourselves with men in this community, because we want to be influenced. We know we'll be influenced. We can't help but be influenced by that.
That, first of all, let me just stop and recognize what you did there and say that's freaking amazing that you had that kind of conversation and open, honest transparency with your dad, which took bravery, which took vulnerability. And it's the right thing to do. So first of all, recognizing that you did that, thank you for doing it. kudos for your dad for accepting it. But what an amazing example of what this game to me is all about. Similar, my dad died it was about 2015. And what I had said, I was able to speak at his funeral, and I literally said, so 3.5 years before he passed, he wanted to start having breakfast on Friday mornings. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So like every Friday morning for 3.5 years, he and I had breakfast, and like, there was no stone unturned, like anything that needed to be said. And I would even have those conversations. Dad, is there anything that you've not said that you feel like you need to say? And I didn't. There was absolutely not one thing. Mom, same thing. So like, gosh, yeah, that's where the juice is, making sure you can just put it out there in a transparent, loving, open, honest way. Like, yeah. So kudos for doing it. And then I just think of, what is the game for me? And the game is healing in all fronts. I talked about the we all model. It's why the Infinite Entrepreneur was built. It's like, let's heal the trauma. So like I do this exercise and meditation. Look, I'll share it. And then actually I'm going to ask you, let's do this. Right. So here's mine. I like to ask, what's your earliest childhood memory of money? All right. And I'll let you sit with that. For me, I walked home, middle school. I walked up. This is the one I remember. Walk up the steps just like any other day, backpack on, and mom's crying at the dining room table. And mom cried a handful of times in my entire life. She was not an emotional lady. And so I knew it was something serious. Went to my room, and then as a kid, I'm kind of listening, see what's up. They were filing for bankruptcy. I overheard what was going on, found out later. So that left an indelible mark. Like, what's this? Why is it so emotional? And I was like, that left a mark on me. Hence, now look at me. I'm in wealth management. Like, this stuff doesn't happen. Yet, early in my career, just like early in my career, it was all about growing the business and doing this, and you're going to set the world on fire. You got all these goals and objectives. It's like, wait a minute, what about family? And I'll tell that story, but I'll finish this one. And that, so the market left on me with scarcity. Like, I would chisel on plane tickets and on any deal. And I would just be like, cause it was like, it wasn't abundance. It was completely protecting what I have. And I had to heal that and did the work. Right. And I still have work to do, but it's definitely now showing up from a place of abundance. So for me, it's like healing. That's the whole game. So it's healing on the personal level. It's healing the family, like what you're talking about. That's the real stuff. It's healing on a business level. Like, example, what's not said in the business that needs to be said? Or another example is, what's the most worshiped addiction in our culture? It's called workaholism. And it's probably the most difficult to break because it is worship. There's healing that needs done there. And then on the money side, I talked about healing there, making the money clean. And like, some of us are still carrying childhood stuff and wounds and trauma.
100%.
Right. So I'll just lay that and then ask you, John, what you would say, and it could be a positive. It doesn't have to be traumatic, but just first childhood memory that you can remember of money that could be positive or challenging.
Yeah. Here's what comes up. I mean, gosh, one of my earliest is like collecting coins with my family. I remember collecting coins with those, those booklets that they were like folding, and you would find the year and you would put them. That's like one of my earliest memories around money. When I think about significant impact, I think about stories that showed up throughout my childhood and even into my adult life from my family. And this isn't a poke at them, by the way. This was also how I interpreted it. I took it, and made my own meaning around these statements. One was, I just had this vision that wealthy people were greedy, that if you had too much money, you were greedy. And number two is that the only way that you would really be happy is if you sacrificed and hurt in order to, like, if you gave and it didn't hurt, that wasn't real giving. Right? Giving needs to be painful. Well, it's fascinating how I picked this up, but I can see how this played out in my life. And a lot of my, I've been wrestling. Finances has been the thing that I've wrestled with the most, because if you could imagine what it's like to be an adult with those beliefs, right?
Totally.
I can show you a lot of things in my life that were like, of course it played out that way, because when you have these core beliefs, this is what happens, right? The minute you start to have a lot of money, you got to find a way to get rid of it so that you're a good person. And I did that repeatedly over and over and over again. A lot of my growth in the wealth category happened through healing, not reading another book, not understanding a strategy of how to make more or save more or where to put it. Although those are all valuable things, most of mine was around healing trauma that, again, not a poke at my parents. Those thoughts, by the way, may have merit. They might have traction in certain context or certain scenarios, or right, in nuanced ways. You go, oh, that could make sense, right? There, but not as a complete operating system, a limited operating system. So I agree with you fully on the healing part. And this is what's so interesting, is this is what I'm attempting to do right now in my life. More than anything, Scott, is actually heal in my life. And that I've had multiple conversations with my best friends around this. The metaphor that we're using is like, okay, we're talking about, in one situation, we're talking about our wives, and we're like, I can't get my wife to do blah, 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 blah. Now that's a whole flawed line of thinking by itself, because you can't get your wife to do anything. But like, I want her to experience this thing with me, right? And let's use dancing as the metaphor, because that's what we're talking. I want her to come dance with me and do this thing. In my relationship, it's just the opposite. She wants me to go dance. But what it is that we keep saying, here's the dance. And we present it like, wouldn't this be fun to do this dance? And here are the steps. And here's the class that we can take. And here's the mentor that we can be guided by. And here are other friends that are going dancing. We try all these things to get people to go dance. So regardless, whether it's the husband to the wife or the wife to the husband, or whatever metaphor you want to use, right? It's like you're trying to get them, entice them, sell the dance. And what we realize is that if you haven't taken a moment to realize that that person's leg is broken, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how you sell it. It doesn't matter how enticing you make the dance floor, right? Their leg is broken. So first step is to heal. Then you can get them on the dance floor. But we sometimes miss that healing part. And last thing I'll say about this is, I was at an event one time and they said, hey, if you want a healing or a blessing, come see me. And I remember saying, I don't have anything to be healed. I'll always take a blessing, but I don't have anything to be healed. And I thought, oh man, that's how I was operating for a while, was nothing needed to be healed. All I needed was give me the goal, give me the framework, tell me the next step. I'm a man of action. I will get shit done. Right? So totally. Oh, it took me until about 47 to realize that healing, rest, space is a valuable part of this journey.
Yeah. Well said.
Dude, and that, it's beautiful is when I look back, that message was there. I just didn't hear it. Like I guess I did hear it intellectually. I didn't embody it. I didn't value it. I didn't totally process rest and recovery. My calendar didn't reflect it. Even if I would have taught it, I'm like, it's important to rest and recover, or create space or meditate. My actions and my daily calendar would not have reflected that. But now it does more so. Wasn't there an old Alan Watts, like, he gave a lecture or something on music. And when you think about music, like, what makes music great? It's actually, is it the sound that you're making, or is it when you're not making the sound? That it's the absence of that sound in those moments, the space in between sounds, that can give it so much life. Otherwise, it's just a steady sound. But if you take breaks, right, and then you weave an orchestra of breaks together in the sounds, that is what brings it to life. So I really, really appreciate that idea of like the space in between notes, the space in between music, that giving value to that in new and unique ways. And that's what happens when people take a time out to go to events like you just did, right? To take a time out and sit with somebody. Or what I love, the phrase that's very much a part of several communities I'm in right now, which is just the idea of holding space. That was a fairly new idea for me, but because I used to host events, and now it's an interesting dynamic as a facilitator to say, what does it mean to just hold space? less important about what I'm saying and more important about what the audience is given the chance to have a little space, a little break, right? Or it happens with keynotes, people giving speeches. If they're just at a high volume and nonstop, that gets very deafening on the ear. But when you pause, that might be one of the most powerful parts of a whole speech. When you let something land, when you let something hit. Or parents face this too with their kids, like always like, what am I telling my kids? What am I teaching my kids? Very important. Yes, there's value in that. And there's as much value as a dad to just hold space for your kids to see what emerges within them. What happens when you stop talking and let them be the teacher? What happens when you stop talking and start listening? You know, people always say, well, what would you go back? And I said it earlier, what would you tell Tiger at 13? Right. But the thing that I've always realized in my life too, is it's not what you would tell somebody when they're 13, but how you would listen to that person when they're 13.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, yes. I say this a lot in our industry, and it's in every industry. I know this one well. I've been doing it for 30 years. And that is, there's 4 things missing, and I'll share one of the 4. The one is there's way too much advice given without a thorough understanding. What I mean by that is typically someone hears in this industry, if you're lucky, 30 to 35% of the conversation, and then launches to solution mode. Man, I got this. I can get you this rate of return. We can do SA. And it's like, it's a good way to really screw up someone's plan, because the answers are like the last 5% of the conversation.
Yeah.
That's where the answers come from. But you have to give space and create safety and time to get to that. And by the way, sometimes the client doesn't want to do that. Well, that's fine. Then it's just not going to be a good fit. When you get to that point, though, the bottom of the iceberg, the stuff that you can't see, we're getting to like the real depth. The answers are easy. But when you don't get there, you're just putting a Band-Aid on, and this thing's going to resurface. So that totally resonates with me. And you mentioned Alan Watts. So I've shared this video years ago, and I can't even remember what it's called, but I could find it. But the essence of it is this. He shows this video, and he's like, you start off and you're born and you go to kindergarten, and you can't wait to get to elementary school. And then you can't wait to get to middle school, and you can't wait for high school. And then, I can't wait for college, and you're going to get a degree, and you're going to get a job, and you can't wait to get married. And when you get married, you can't wait to have kids. And you can't wait to get to retire. And at some point you go, wait a minute. What was the point of all this? What am I chasing? And like, we all do this. And the point is, what are we chasing? Like, isn't the present moment literally all we have? And like, who sold this bill of goods? So I totally resonate with that message. But of course I do it. I knew I would, but still, it's just good to share. It's good to reciprocate. One of our other core values is batteries included, which clearly you have them, because when you do, you're able to do what nature does, and it's a reciprocal conversation, right? Because I have my own batteries and things to share, and you do, then it can be reciprocity. Someone shows out without batteries included, all of a sudden it's just draining your battery, and it depletes the energy, and it's an energy leak.
Scott, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
All right. I mean, I know this is your show, but
shoot, man.
So we talk about energy. Money can be energy, right? It's voting with our dollars, making money clean, right? Just where we put our where do we invest our dollars? And earlier you're like, hey, sometimes you said, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it made me think, gosh, there are things I know that I shouldn't buy, but out of convenience sake, I do. Right? Or I go to a restaurant and I buy food, and it comes in all this packaging that I'm not a fan, that I've created all this waste. I've voted with my dollars. I supported a restaurant that packages everything with all this wasteful material. I order through Amazon. It shows up with way too much packing material, whatever it would be. Right? I know we all have those in our lives. We probably know, like, what do you struggle with the most, where out of convenience you say yes, but your heart's like, man, I really need to find another way when it comes to voting with your dollars?
I can easily answer that, because it just happened to me again today, and you just gave the example. So I'm still working on this, and it's what I do for a living. So there's no judgment for anyone listening to say, because I still do. And I've done a lot of work on it, making sure that my votes are congruent with who I am and what I believe. But the first thing is who are you and what do you believe, which takes work.
Yes.
Well, mine are clear: health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. And 3 things. That's my core values personally. Have them as a family, have them as a business. Amazon, like this freaking easy button. When I find something that I need, it just happened today. And I get a box and I open this box and it's got all this freaking plastic and excess stuff. And the downstream effect on that, that is not congruent for me. And I literally felt it as I'm getting rid of this stuff, because it's like, where's it going to go? And then, by the way, literally had a conversation with the guy who does this packaging with plastics and how they're trying to make it more efficient. He said, but you got to understand, all your recycling efforts, what you think is happening at the landfill with that? It's not what's happening. Like, they have their own. It ends up back in the land a lot of times. And that's what, anyway, so there's a whole nother story about that. But just to directly answer your question, the ease of convenience, I still struggle with being incongruent with what I really value, and yet not taking the time to really say, okay, where can I get this and do it in a way that I'm not creating as much waste?
Yeah.
That's it for me. That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine is, thank you for saying that, by the way, because that's certainly got to be top 5 for me, is the consumption, the waste through consumption. Yes. And I play this out in my head all the time. Well, it's like, well, then I have to drive to the store, and they're still sending the stuff to the store in boxes and packaging material, even though they're sending it. Like I have this whole debate in my head, and I just wish that I wish I had more confidence. Like you said, in the recycling centers, I wish I had more confidence. Even in the numbers, I wish somebody did the breakdown and say, no, Jon, you're okay doing it this way, because I haven't crunched the numbers or understood the actual impact of all this. But still, when I see those things, I cringe. Mine is seafood. I watched the movie Seaspiracy, and I thought it was really well done, and talking about how we're fishing in our oceans and how we're dragging the ocean floor and disrupting the ecosystem, and our system, our ocean might be collapsing, and here's the numbers. And I'm just looking at this going, man, I really only want to support eating like fish that are line caught, that might not be these gigantic fishing industries, and maybe support more local fishermen and so on and so forth. And, without disrupting the ecosystem in the ways that we sometimes do through the mass fishing. But then I'll still order oysters in a can in bulk quantity. And I'm like, it's seafood. Every time I order seafood now, after I've seen that movie, I pause and I ask myself, where am I in this? And how am I contributing to this?
You know what? At least we're asking the question, right? Yeah. So at least and literally for me, any time I do something. So again, if I truly do my best to show up with every moment presents itself for how can I lift it, and or what can I learn from it? And in this case, what can I learn from it? That's my takeaway just from our chat today is, what can I do if I'm going to hit the easy button? Can I take one extra step, knowing the companies that do package more aligned with my value system? Can I at least take that step? The answer is yes. You just have to pause.
Yeah.
Shocker. To be able to go, okay, and then order from that company, because it's not a something you need the next day, which you can get now, right? Which, how crazy is that you could even do that, but just one more step in alignment. And then same with, when we're buying meat or produce, and we are on a permaculture setup and have a lot of our own food here. So that's as local as you can get. But then the next step is the local farm market, and, getting the blueberries from a local farm market that we know, and doing those things because it's healthier. Number one, you're supporting your local community. Number two, 3, there's less production, right? And less waste because of it. And so all these things are voting with your dollars. So to me, as long as we're having a conversation about it right now, right? So hopefully that helps move things forward. So I think that's all good. It does feel like people are waking up to it. At least I know I am. But that's the biggest one, is that easy button gets me.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
All right.
You talked about your son at 13, and you've been in business and have have your life experiences. What a lot of people are business owners, entrepreneurs listening to this. What would you tell a 35 35-year-old business owner and entrepreneur, if you went back to when you were 35, what would you say to your 35-year-old self that you've learned now?
And is this relating specifically to parenting?
Well, if you're led to that, I would just say whatever comes up. If you had the opportunity to go back and, you're 35, what would be the most valuable piece of wisdom you would want to share with 35-year-old Jon?
If I was sitting down with 35-year-old Jon, I would ask the question, like, who are you? Right? At your core, what do you care about? What is, and I've had this described to me by one of my, what would I call this person? A guide, a therapist, a coach. They described to me in their particular view of the world. They said, in the Incan tradition, you have this seed that's within you in your chest, and it's an Inca seed, and it's your job is to figure out what that is, right? What is that supposed to be? And the truest expression of your absolute most authentic self, that is the mission. And what is that? And the more that we can ask that question, and I don't think that it would even be asked to that 35-year-old thinking that because I asked the question that they would have the answer, to that question immediately, like in that session or that day or whatever. But I think it's an ongoing question through our lives. And I would ask that same question to a 25-year-old or a 13-year-old. And we're still asking that question now of just who am I, right? In this moment, I'm going to Burning Man this weekend, and I leave on Sunday. And the question, as you start thinking about Burning Man, and for those who don't know what that is, and I know many do, it's 7 days. It's a festival that they host in the desert. And it's essentially like within 7 days, they set up a absolute town, a village. Have you been, by the way?
No. Okay. I have so many people that I know that go, and actually, anyway, we'll talk more about that. Tens
of thousands of people who set up camp, and there's this beautiful community feel to it all. But here's the point. The reason I brought it up is because that event, our community has been asking the people I'm going with, what is it that you want this event to be about for you? And mine is to be a place where I can continue to ask the question, who am I? Who am I in this environment? Who am I as it relates to this beautiful art structure? Who am I as it relates to my wife, my friends, the community? Who am I in this moment? Because at Burning Man, you'll see these people in these elaborate costumes, and some people are naked and some people are dressed to the, in these incredibly creative costumes. But the question that comes up, because I got really scared about this, I'm like, God, I don't know what to wear. I don't really play dress up. It doesn't really actually excite me to think about this. I don't want to put a lot of time into that. But even that was informative for me. Why am I nervous about this? What am I scared of? Why does this make me so uncomfortable? And what version of Jon do I want to bring forward? If I'm in a community where I can wear anything I want or wear nothing at all, what do I actually want? What are my fears teaching me? What are my desires teaching me? How, right? Like all of this is just a continual play, a continual practice into who am I really? And how do I want to show up in this particular environment, in this time of my life? And maybe I'm operating from some blueprints in the past that no longer serve me. Maybe who I wanted to be at 35 is not who I want to be at 47, right? It's and just because I said I wanted to do it yesterday doesn't mean I'm going to want to do it today, right? I could wake up tomorrow and feel totally different. And do I give myself permission to then be that new version of myself? So I think that at any point in life, I want to, at least where I am presently, for myself and those around me of any age, to continue to ask, who are you really? What's within you? How do you want to bring that into the world? Right? And what's the next step to bring that version of yourself? And even if you're playing, you're like, I don't know. Well, cool. Let's play with this one and see how it feels, and play with this one and see how it feels. And sometimes, that putting something on and going, I don't like the way that looks or feels. That's what you're doing, right? You're just putting it on. Let me try this. Let me try this business. Let me try this approach. Let me try this, right? And you just play and bring more play into that. And that's what I'm trying to do, is not take it all so seriously, figure out what feels right to me, and then let all those lessons that I get at Burning Man, bring those back into my business and my family.
Well, you mentioned Samuel earlier, and so I say something to Samuel a lot that I'll share in a bit, and then the play piece. I'm going to take this full circle, and then I'll ask you what you any closing things you would want to share with the audience. But this is the full circle for me. Is this? So remember who you are. So you talk about triggering a childhood memory. Every time I was raised in a minister's home. Dad was a Baptist preacher, and so every time I would leave. Every time he would say, "Hey, boy," I'd look over. He goes, "Remember who you are." I know what he meant, right? I'm a PK, preacher's kid. And so remember who you are. You're a Ford and you're a preacher's kid, right? Well, I have a different perspective on that now. This is what's so interesting, a full circle, because actually I have a sister. We all have different belief systems, right? We all have our own path, and that's beautiful. I have a sister that I recognized that she had a tattoo and it said, "Remember who you are." And at first I was like, why would she do that? Why would you brand that? But then I went, she might not know what that means. Maybe she does. I believe this. I know what it means to me now. And what it means to me now is, yeah, really, who am I? And like, I do know who I am. And it's like, wow, that's what that means. That's why all that happened, was to truly, Scott, remember who you are. And then it takes me to a spiritual experience I had where I saw this, and it was creation and then 12 strands of DNA that spiraled into me, which was creation. We're all created, no matter what you believe. And you don't believe that, but here we are. And it was like, well, then what's the purpose? The purpose is you were created to fully express your creation. Your unique DNA. So I always say none of this is that serious. None of it. What we're to do, my perspective, is to fully express and have fun and fully express what we were created in our unique DNA sequence to be that. You want to know why? Because no one else can. I can't be Jon Vroman. You can't be Scott Ford. And how beautiful is that? But you can be fully you and I can be fully me. And that's my job to be here. And so when I really finally got that, I'm like, I can do that because that's just who I am. So to me, that's the game.
I love that, man. I'm going to take that with me. I mean, like you said, it's, what do we take from these conversations that we have? And hopefully if other people benefit too, that's wonderful. You and I were having a chat and other people can choose whether or not this aligned with them. But man, "it's not that serious" comment is like perfect for me, because so much of my pain comes from making it too serious. Closing the back door, kids picking up their shoes. Like, I can make these things so serious. Like, if you don't learn the skill of closing the door, you're not even going to make it in this life. I can make it so serious, Scott. You know what I mean? I can take these small moments and I can give them so much meaning, so much weight. I could give you 12 other examples instantly of places where I'm like, I could look at something now and go, "Really, Jon, you made that big of a deal?" Whew, take a breath, man. Lighten up a little bit. I love that. And remember who you are. I love that piece because, and it's also, it is that remembrance of like, who were you as a child, but it's also who are you now? Right? Yeah. Who are you in this moment? Who is the evolved version of Scott Ford? Now that he has all that, you take that child, don't cast him aside. Don't throw out the 0 to 7-year-old child that had a lot of innate wisdom before you started getting all programmed by the world. That's all there. And all of what you've learned, all the things that all the experiences, that's also part of maybe who you are. Yeah. So as of today, who am I in this now moment?
Beautifully said. And that was the reasons it all happens, because as Robin said, Tony, life happens for you, not to you.
That's
Couldn't
right.
agree with you more. All those things that were said, the tattoo, spot on. And however it resonates with them, wonderful. How it resonates with me, wonderful. It's like everything. The other thing that I'll say is, and I'll share this with Sammy too, everything's perfect.
Yeah.
It's all perfect. So look, man.
Love it.
I've loved having you on. I love the wisdom you
shared.
shared.
Don't say we got to go, Scott.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again.
Cool.
We'll do round 2 if you're open to it. And yeah, I've loved it. I figured I would. And let's do it. Let's do round 2, man, and follow up. But see you, appreciate you, and resonate with your message and what you're up to. So let's just continue on doing our best to be who we're here to be. Bottom line, be fully who we were created to be. Be that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And let me say this also, Scott, for anybody out there that's listening, you mentioned Rich earlier. I'm not 100% on this, but I think it's possible that Rich is going to be with us in December for an event we've got, the 2nd through the 4th. And I just wanted to make that, put that out there because like you, I am a big fan of Rich's and the work that he's done. And since we brought up his name, I wanted to let people know there's a good chance of that, that we're going to have him with us in Austin for the Front Row Dad live event. And
thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people know.
And actually, yes, he is my understanding, December 2nd through the 4th.
Yeah.
frontrowdads.com/live is where people can get more. And look, there's going to be more than Rich there. And if there wasn't more than Rich there, I'm telling you straight up, if you can spend time listening to this man of wisdom, you need to go. So December 2nd through the 4th, frontrowdads.com/live. Yeah, check it out. If it was just Rich, and there's going to be way more than that, I know you'll be there and there'll be other speakers. So please check that out and you won't regret it. So let's do it again, man. Thank you, Jon. Audience, we'll catch you again next week on the Way to Wealth podcast. We're all about making money simple so you can fully live, and you can do that now, not 30 years from now. We'll catch you all next week.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Legato Family is not affiliated with Cetera Advisor Networks LLC or CWM LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.